Episode 4. Today, I'm very happy to have this guest. Sometimes doing this, you talk to people that have such a unique way of looking at recovery that it's just like, this is one of those episodes. I might have said 10 sentences this whole hour that Ed Cilinski and I talked. I first met Ed when I was in treatment. He was behind the scenes administrative with the tech department or administrative somewhere. I forget the name. I don't remember the role, but he was there and I remember running into him. So now he's more upfront with the patients and he's also teaching with the patient. I'm not going to spoil much because there were so many things in this episode that I've already put into my life that made me kind of realize things that I haven't been able to figure out in years about myself and how I manage certain emotion. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from this episode, so I'm going to shut up. Here's episode 4 with Ed Cilinski. It's bad to say, Ed, but I love physical items because I didn't grow up poor, like middle class. My dad, back when I was growing up, 40 grand a year was okay. And then my mom was a teacher that worked for like urban schools. Like she was the only Caucasian in the school system. She loved her job. That's what she did forever, as long as I can remember. Like, I never got the stuff that I wanted, but I was an only child, so I got more than they could afford. But when I, got heavy into, drinking and drugging, and, it wasn't anything for me to just sell something, And my parents, paying my rent then till I got on my feet, and they had no idea about any of it. For, 15 years, I was in active addiction, and they had no idea. Or maybe they didn't want to admit it. I don't
Usually
know.
A little of both, but yeah.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like one of those things that's I know it's silly because if this house were to burn down right now and my family was okay, I would be okay. But I'd be really fucking sad because I really like my toys and I've never been able to buy them myself and keep them. So to me, it's like personal trophies. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. You're describing emotional or material security.
Yeah.
That's broken down in the big book.
It is what it is. Yeah.
And a healthy sense of it is part of our deal.
Mm-hmm.
We got to have stuff.
I got to have stuff.
Too hyper-focused on stuff, we're in trouble.
I'm not hyper-focused, but I have a problem with impulse purchasing, just like any other addict. It's all about inanimate objects. Perfect example, yesterday I was trying to get to where I could use my audio system to mix with the fancy Mac and be able to use it to play video games with the PC, and it's just overpowering everything. I couldn't figure it out, and I spent $60 on cables and a switcher box that was powered, and is it more than I need? Yeah. Is it going to work? Fuck, I don't know. I don't know, but I obsessed about it, and I couldn't even focus on my calls until I did it.
I was just thinking it weaves through everything.
Mm-hmm.
Those instincts are all part of the deal, and we have a pattern of pursuing them very selfishly, and that can come well into sobriety and recovery.
Yeah.
And can be a path back to if it's not in check. But obviously it's in check. You're talking about it.
I'm very self-aware of my strengths and my flaws. Way more flaws than strengths. I'm very self-aware of it. I definitely know. I can feel from a mile away if I need to go to a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that often anymore. I do have a strong support group here with my wife. My wife has a brother who grew up an addict. She's really kind of just been around addicts with friends and family. So she's kind of like that Al-Anon side to where she has learned her coping skills and can see things. Like I can't get shit past her. Like it's just not. She is a bullshit detector. So we've been together 6 years, and like, and I say this a lot of episodes, like me and her have never raised our voices at each other. I've never lied to her. First person in my life. Like everything has been transparent since the second we met, and I just regurgitated my addiction stuff on her the second we met.
Which you met her in a recovery, yes?
No, she's a normal. I met her on Plenty of Fish, the Section 8 of dating apps. This is where I met her, and we went out for a date, and we went and sat on a bench, had some tea, smoked some cigarettes, and we've been inseparable ever since.
Dang.
Yeah. It's crazy. Lucky.
So she supported you in the worst.
She has supported me in the worst. She's supported me in the best.
To get you to the best.
Yeah, vice versa. Like, she definitely makes me the best person I could be. And honestly, my daughter kind of puts the cherry on top of that. And so do my stepsons. I love them all equally, honestly.
It's connection.
It is. It is. I think the main thing is, and I know this is so cliche, my higher power, whatever that is, honestly, I'm not even sure what that is yet. But it definitely got me ready for them. And that's what I think. So it's just pretty great life. I still have my characteristics where I'm very easily go from 0 to 10 on the anxiety. Not like freak out crying in the corner in the fetal position, but what was the last thing? Oh, the car broke down. So now I'm just terrified about having a car payment, which I haven't had to have in like 8 years. So now I'm like, how am I going to afford that? Where are we going to get that? What kind of car are we going to get? We can't get a crappy car. I'll just ride a skateboard around and Rob can drive that car, but that's not going to work. And it's just constantly. So I kind of have to do like my breathing exercises. Listening to heavy punk rock or metal calms me down, believe it or not. And playing video games, editing this show.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. We're still going to go there. And I think any practice of recovery is recognizing that, finding a way to back off it and move through it. And you just described it.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel good. Thank you.
Well, because our brains are conditioned for it.
Yeah.
It's not just conditioned to drink and use. It's conditioned for extreme, irrational, when life feels unacceptable.
Yeah.
So
that's very true.
And I think that's the difference between just calling it sobriety versus recovery.
Yeah. Very much.
Sobriety is the only piece of this that's all or nothing. Recovery, on the other hand, that is just the constant work of staying in the game.
Keeping your head clear.
But I think our likelihood of doing that is also very contingent on our overall sense of connection.
Very true.
Because if I'm not fulfilled in from within with that, I'm still looking out. Yeah. And I'm going to get caught up in the other instincts, like material.
For one, let me ask you this for us. What was your sober date? I know we talked a little bit about
September
it.
25th, 2023.
Okay. Yeah. And you had some time before that, too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was introduced to recovery in 2003.
Yeah.
And, relapse is just part of my deal.
Yeah.
But each time I understand and have come to understand, relapse is not a start over. Maybe a reset, maybe a start over on sobriety days. But I also don't think this is a competition for who has the most sobriety days. It's a cooperation of how do we work in the fellowships to get into life and find quality in it. And so relapse is a reset back to who we are. And I think it's not, while it's not a necessary part of the process, for a lot of people, it's just going to be part of the process. There's just so much involved. And, from a science level, physiology, we rewire the brain. And like I said, my brain is conditioned. I did that to drink and use.
Yeah.
And the chronic nature of that is it's always going to have that tendency. And so that's a piece of it. But the other piece really is, I know all too well that there's no middle ground here. Bill Wilson said it best. We either grow or we deteriorate.
Yeah.
And so that sense of complacency, that sense of, that's the disease.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I also believe when folks come back, as I have too, that this is about building upon experience in recovery. It's not starting over.
No, yeah. I've never thought it would be like I have not. I've been very lucky and hardworking to kind of stay focused, especially after my daughter was born, to like her never to see that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say I never would. Since starting this show last year and talking to so many different people that do recovery so many different ways, I've reminded myself to get out of my own way and never say never,
Mm-hmm.
but also understand that, you know, it's not what I originally thought because of my stubbornness. Is that, I think, yeah, that's a good way of saying it. I mean, I'm very hard on myself about certain things, but also I'm very forgiving on myself. Like, I've learned to take humility and make it a complete strength and not something to weigh me down.
It's essential.
It is so essential. I didn't realize that even in my first 6 to 8 a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was so embarrassed about so many different things, anxiety driven, and I can't tell you the last time I blushed. Like, I just can't, because I digress.
Well, no, you're exactly in the right direction, because I also know that the make or break of recovery is it starts with our sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, we condition our brains to drink and use because of a compromised sense of self. So one thing I've learned, and one thing I was able to do, was come back around, and how I teach, how I'm an influence, and how I live is really based on that this is really all about emotion.
Yeah.
All of it. And the number one emotion that we don't talk about, you've referenced it in our talk so far. I beat myself up. I've been embarrassed. I get extremely anxious.
Mm-hmm.
That's all shame.
Yeah.
And we will not, there's no way out of shame without humility. Because humility, people think of it as being, I'm humble, I'm quiet, I'm meek. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It is a solid sense of self. So that makes me confident. That makes me an influence in life, whatever that platform is of connection. And we all have it.
Yeah.
And so, but I think the trapping is we don't see shame for what it is. We don't call it, which means then we don't manage it necessarily. Because let's take embarrassment. Embarrassment is all about connection. Somehow, in some connection that I see, I perceive as something didn't go well.
Yeah.
That it compromised me, the actual connection. Well, my heightened sense of embarrassment is going to come from an already compromised sense of self. If I'm operating out of shame, it's not going to take much to feel that sense of I'm not enough in this connection. Yeah. Or I fell short, or I've been judged, or whatever it is. So, like you said, it's been a while since you blushed.
Yeah.
What you're really speaking is the work through shame. And I know a few things about shame. One, it's universal. We all have it. Every human being on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all, and though it feels real, drives our sense of disconnection, because it's the biggest barrier to it, it's always bullshit. Shame is always inaccurate. But that's the piece we have to take ownership for. I can describe that shame is, I'm bad, I'm not enough, I'm different, I fall short, I'm not worthy of connection itself. Mm-hmm. But I can't tell you your sense of shame. I got pretty good at recognizing mine now.
Yeah.
Because really how we feel that is as unique as our fingerprints, because it's based on our experience in life.
Yeah.
Kind of the same as our concept of something bigger than us.
Right.
Also unique as our fingerprint.
Right.
So, and I think it all goes together. Everything surrounds the work through shame. But we don't name it because we just recently started talking about it. Take the inventory. It's all emotion, resentment, anger I can't let go of.
Yeah.
Fear so big I can't look at it. And the harms I create is all about shame and guilt. Well, guilt's easy. Guilt's just about behavior, the things I've done. That's easily resolved. Stop doing that shit and show up and own it. Shame, on the other hand, requires a lot of work.
A lot of work, a lot of understanding on what triggers that feeling.
And here comes humility. Humility is that initial practice of mindfulness.
If you had to pick an emotion, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you had to pick an emotion that would trigger shame for you,
it's the other way around. Shame triggers the other emotions. We hold on to anger because of shame.
Yeah.
Because that's no longer about somebody pissed me off or did something to me.
Yeah.
I'm allowing myself to still suffer through it.
Right.
Fear. Triggered by shame, the unmanaged part of fear. Because built into fear getting so big is something in me, I can't handle this threat or whatever I'm perceiving as dangerous.
Yeah.
So we freak out. Fight, flight, freeze, do all the things.
Right.
Let's take loneliness.
Yeah.
Loneliness is completely optional. We feel lonely because of shame, because we're not showing up for connection. We have a promise about that in the 12 steps in the 12th step.
Yeah.
We see loneliness vanish. Because
I think and hear me out here. I think this is so damn interesting. 'Cause I hear where you're coming from on it, and that's absolutely correct, the way you identify with that. With different personalities, different mindsets, the more simple thought process personality versus the more complex thought process personality. I'm kind of like a complex thought process. I can go through every single emotion in 5 seconds and then laugh at myself because I know I'm a clown about a lot of it for letting all those emotions happen. Triggering the shame, I think, is when you start to realize where all those emotions, so let's call the trigger your starting point to where all those emotions come in. Animosity is a huge one. I've always had this animosity, not so much anymore because I'm old and don't care. But when I was younger, I kind of still do, about money, for example. If I see somebody that has a lot of money and they're just, in my eyes, a horrible human, lie, cheat, steal, just not a good person, and then don't have that money and that security blanket of financial freedom, that used to make me, still a little bit, but not so much, but it used to make me irate. And that would trigger me getting anger of me not having that, and why did the world or whatever higher power give that person this, and how is he not being punished for the things he's doing to people? That would then trigger more of a reaction of sadness, that I just got mad at that. And then I still look around and understand why I got mad at that, but it's not that person's fault, but it is their fault because they're that way. But why do I have to look at them and have that animosity, anger, and sadness? Then comes that shame to where I realize my thought process. So that's where me personally, when the non-blushing comes in and the shame comes in, that's where I kind of, it's not much embarrassment or shame. It's more of a self-aware, like, kind of just scolding myself a little bit. Like, man, that was a dark rabbit hole. You just took yourself down there for no damn reason whatsoever. That none of that point makes me want to use or drink or anything like that, but it does make me more impulsive to want to go buy things to make myself happy.
Which again, pattern, instant gratification.
Yeah.
It's the same brain muscle. And it left unchecked, depending on, and again, here's where there's so many, I can't say what would lead somebody back to a drink or drug. What I know is that if we don't manage the very emotion around it, craving's going to light up eventually. Oh, yeah. If we've developed it. And again, I can't say that either for anybody. Right. We have to figure that out for ourselves. But what you just described to me seems very reactive to shame.
Yeah.
And I believe the next step in that is staying proactive with it. you mentioned triggers. Well, an emotion isn't a trigger. The emotion is what we're feeling. We're built to feel emotion, all of them. So one thing I also have learned is language is everything. And it literally is our doorway or portal to the understanding of ourselves as human beings, but also how we communicate that through connection.
Absolutely.
So the more accurate language, the more accurate understanding of feeling, the more accurate thought around it, the more accurate how we show up. So one of the things we have to throw out is that there are negative emotions. That's old language. Anger, fear, embarrassment even, loneliness. They're all part of the human condition. Research is clear to show this. So what makes them negative? They're challenging. They're damned uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the negative outcome is simply the mismanagement of it. And the thing about shame is it's not to be avoided. We think of shame as bad. It's not.
Oh, yeah, no.
In fact, somebody asked me once, and is there anything good about shame? You talk about it all damn day. Well, there is something good about it because it sets us up for the antidote to shame, which through humility, once I understand me, now I can show up in the understanding of others, showing up in the support of others, empathy. And that's really what the fellowships of recovery are based on. And it really is what the human condition is based on. So because I experience shame, I can see shame in other people. It looks like anger. It feels like that, but it's not. And it's just shame unleashed.
Okay.
So again, our sense of confidence in how we experience the challenging emotions is based on our sense of self. There's no way around it. So that brings up vulnerability. It is the essential component of connection. The willingness. So it's not a weakness. It's not lowering your guard. All those things about vulnerability
totally
need to be thrown out.
100%
it takes great bravery because it's the willingness to show up for the risk, the uncertainty, and emotional exposure of connection.
In the unknown, really.
So that's uncertainty.
Yeah.
The risk part is connection's not always going to go well. We're going to have misconnections. We're going to get hurt. We're going to get rejected. And emotional exposure? Well, one, if I can't manage the risk, in other words, I can't manage the rejection. So it's like showing up for a job interview and getting the job or not.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is asking someone on a first date and getting a yes or a no. If I can't handle the downside of it, I'm going to stop showing up for the good stuff. Because the emotion that requires the most exposure is love.
Yeah.
Well, again, the emotion that we protect and hide the most is shame itself. And so if I'm all in that, I'm going to stop showing up for the good stuff. Or I'm going to try to show up for it, but not as my authentic self. So what do? We show up with drugs and alcohol on board. Or we show up for bullshit connections. I mean, how many times do we sometimes settle for toxic, unhealthy, even dangerous and abusive relationships in this? All driven by shame. You've mentioned it. You know, you've had experiences, I'm sure, where you've done something, made a mistake, maybe even hurt somebody, and then you beat yourself up for it.
Oh, yeah.
Or you're questioning whether, can I really do this? How am I going to, like you were mentioning in the new car, how am I going to pay for it? Okay, what we're not doing is recognizing in that moment, this is shame, and then taking ownership for it. The reality is, once we call it for what it is, we tend to become way less angry, way less anxious, definitely less lonely. But it's not just going to go away. It's creepy. It creeps in.
Yeah. So basically what you're I think I'm getting what you're laying down. Basically from what I'm understanding what you're saying is shame basically being the catalyst for most, if not all, basis of emotion.
It creates the tendency to mismanage these emotions.
the misunderstanding of what shame is leads to the mismanagement of emotions.
The built-in compromised sense of self, which that's all shame is. I'm inaccurate about me.
Yeah.
Something about me is I'm not fulfilled in my sense of me. And usually that's the result of some experience of connection that maybe was hurtful, which then leads us then to really shaking our reliance on connection itself. I mean, that's what the whole process of the 12 steps is about. Mm-hmm. Shifting reliance back to connection, to the something bigger than us.
Yeah.
And so if you look at resentment, if you look at fear, and if you look at that whole inventory in harms, pay attention to why am I allowing myself to hold on to anger? That's shame. Why couldn't I step through this fear and keep it managed? That's shame. And why do I keep doing things to hurt others? See, that's the other thing about shame. I'm bad. I'm not enough. But it's all about me. Mm-hmm. So that's self-imposed permission to do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, as you could probably already guess, it can't be overspoken.
No.
Because once it becomes automatic, we begin to go, and that's like when I teach anger management, what I'm really teaching is shame management. So the make or break of when I'm pissed off, if I stay focused out on what's pissing or who's pissing me off, I'm missing the whole boat. The management part comes from, wait, why am I so pissed off about this? That's the taking ownership for it. And then what can I do with it? You know, with anger, we can motivate for change, or we just have to let it go. Well, hell of a lot easier to have the courage to change the things I can than to accept the things I cannot.
Yeah, I hear you. Me being somebody who, for the right reasons, can get hot, can get very angry. You know, I mean, it's usually not directed at people unless it's some sort of injustice that I feel like I'm the only person that can fix it at that point, which is silly. I'm not sure, because when I do get upset or angry, it's a completely different feeling than a shame. It's more of, now, do I stop and analyze why I'm angry? My anger, immediately I have to go through my immediately, like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to go talk to him, and it's most likely going to end up me hitting him or him hitting me. That's just one thing that's going to come out of that, unless I can position this perfectly. Second is this worth, I'm by myself, so my kids aren't around, so okay, I'm clear there. But what has this guy been going through to be able to treat that person like that? Now,
that's empathy.
That's empathy, right? Yeah. I think bargaining and self-bargaining on how to react to things has been huge for me.
I think all of us.
Yeah. I can react horribly, but that thought process goes through to make sure I sincerely, in my heart of hearts, feel valid for having the outburst that I'm about to have.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know how to word this. Like, to me, it's not like shame. It's more of a, holy shit, it's shame. Because it's a validation that I have to put myself through, and the thought of not doing what I think is acceptable to either help somebody or stand up for somebody, and me not doing it, the feeling of being, Ed.
So that's just it. We just got to start thinking about it. We got to start putting our heads around it, to how it drives it. Just like your example with somebody who has a lot of money and they're assholes.
Yeah.
The real deal with shame is that comes into now comparison. All right, we're social beings. It is absolutely part of the human condition to compare to others. But competition with comparison, if that's not from a healthy sense of self, shame driven with competition through comparison, I have this inherent need that I got to one up. Some of the most narcissistic people. That's all shame driven, though.
Yeah.
I got to one up with you because I'm really not solid with me. And again, it's not like oh God, I have shame. I must be it's part of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's to be managed like any other emotion, to be acknowledged, felt. Here's mindfulness. I got to be aware of it. And observe it, not interpret it. And then learn how to move through it.
It's funny. I kind of I had some things going through my head to where I was really wondering why they were lingering. And as I'm sitting here listening to you, you're naming off things. I'm like, oh shit, that's why that's lingering. That's why I really never.
Shame is the condition of being stuck.
Yeah.
And it also aligns with the sense of crisis that we feel in not just addiction, but, and we didn't have crisis interventionists back in the 30s.
Right.
And so I'm the crisis interventionist too, so just so you know. But Bill Wilson and We Agnostics, and it took me my last reading of the big book, and which I've read about 5 times.
Yeah.
And that's why I truly believe that first instruction in the beginning of the book, read this book, every time we do a thorough taking the steps is key, because we're not the same person. I pull something from it, from being in this moment. But in We Agnostics, he describes addiction as self-imposed crisis. He uses the word. Well, crisis is part of the human condition. We live in it every day because the first level of it is actually called anxiety.
Yeah.
It's just the uncertainty of the day. So again, crisis isn't to be avoided either. We live in it. What we can do is manage ourselves in it and learn how not to escalate through. But here comes science again. The science of crisis itself for every human being. When we have that threat, when we're emotion center and primal brain rev up. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, reasoning, decision-making gets hijacked, and now we're losing our shit in many ways. It could be anger, fear, whatever. Well, the same exact thing happens with craving. Except there it's based on that raised pleasure threshold and that pursuit to get it back there. But it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. We lose the ability to really think, which means we lose the ability to manage the emotion around it.
Yeah.
Which is why we tend, even well past initial sobriety, to still lose our shit kind of people.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of times, most of the time, when I see somebody in crisis, it looks like anger most of the time. It could be also like a panic attack out of fear and anxiety, but that is shame unleashed. And get back to that, it all turns around. So empathy is the focus. But empathy isn't the easiest thing to do. Mm-mm. One, I cannot understand you and show up to support you if I don't have that for me.
Right.
So that's where humility comes in. That has to be in place first. Trust me. I have fallen into unaware shame, but tried to stay in empathy with it and just focus out. It's not sustaining. And in a lot of ways, it's building upon that same pattern of outward instant gratification. Oh, I'm still useful, but it's not my authentic self being useful. And eventually shame becomes the barrier again.
Okay.
If you know what I mean? Like, it's just like a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to fit in, especially around a drink or drug. But we find ourselves trying, and we rearrange ourselves as we think others will find us acceptable. Well, humility is not that, and neither is empathy or true belonging. True connection, authentic connection, doesn't require us to change who we are. We have to be who we are.
You also have to be comfortable with who you are.
Exactly.
That's the biggest key, because you can be a chameleon forever.
Correct.
And especially, I've always said that
that whole the alcoholic and addict leads a dual life.
Mm-hmm.
That's shame.
You just took.
I'm bearing shame, and this is what I want you to see. We think shame needs to be protected.
Yeah.
When the opposite is true, it needs to be exposed, spoken. And sometimes just speaking it is enough to really start to move through it.
Right. But I'm not playing the devil's advocate here.
Oh,
no,
please
I
do.
completely agree with everything you just said there. I'm having a little, and it might be me, might just be a block. Like I am understanding and am agreeing that shame is the beginning and end of understanding a lot of things. Because for one, the shame, it has to be acknowledged. In order to that, you have to be comfortable with acknowledging it and be able to
not necessarily.
it.
No, the work through shame is going to feel uncomfortable. It should.
Yeah, it should. But to understand that it is shame is a point that you get, I would say, right after that. Like, it's going to be uncomfortable. But once you understand that it is shame, it is humility, but you're able to...
And really what we're understanding is, I did this. Nobody did this to me.
Exactly. Accountability.
Ownership, yes.
Yeah. Accountability.
Yes.
But still at the end of everything there, once you have acknowledged and been able to, I guess you could say, align with yourself a little bit to understand that it is shame and embrace it and learn from it, then there's that afterthought of actually more shame because you did not realize it sooner. And then you start to give yourself...
No, that's back in the shame cycle again. Remember, mindfulness is purposeful attention to self,
right,
to thoughts, to emotion, without judgment and with compassion. It's observation, not interpretation.
Right.
I should have done this sooner is interpretation. That's, again, a bullshit story. We got to stick to what is.
But where do you learn? Where is the period at the end of that sentence and the beginning of the next? Because shame,
it's like this, trauma. Let's take trauma.
Okay.
Universal for us. Because if it wasn't that aspect of life that I found challenging, threatening, unacceptable, hurtful, that I was stuck in and still resisting.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that prior to addiction, when craving takes over, I don't know about you, I didn't really have a huge sense of trauma prior to addiction, but boy, I have it as a result of. When I am out of control, I am dangerous and reckless.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's universal for us. All right, the work through trauma is, yes, we acknowledge the event, but the make or break of the relief is, what am I doing with it now? And that's true that's it with shame. I can't change that this is how I allowed myself to operate in life.
Mm-hmm.
I can't change that I held on to anger for so long. I can't change that I sold myself short, showing up for life for so long. What I can change is, what am I going to do with that right now?
Yeah.
And so it has to be about, and that's all this is. We go from inaccurate belief about ourselves and life to accuracy. It is all about alignment. Aligning my sense of self with the world around me and how I fit into the world. Shame's going to be the barrier. We look how we don't fit in. And I'll tell you, when it comes to work through shame, if you look out for evidence that you're not enough, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
If you look out here for evidence that you're different, you're going to find it. If you look for evidence that you don't belong, we'll find it. It's all from within.
Where does the feeling of self-accomplishment come, though, if it's all based around shame? Like so basically from what I'm hearing is every emotion has a basis of shame, anger, anxiety, sadness, which, yeah, I can see those, but where is the point to where a self-accomplishment comes from learning?
Let me be clear. Wait a minute. Those emotions don't have to have the attachment of shame.
Right, okay.
When I mismanage them, typically shame's involved.
All through mismanagement.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Correct.
I got you.
So, for example, let's take anxiety, uncertainty.
Yeah.
I've been at the Wilmington Treatment Center for 10 years.
Yeah.
I know my job. I know how to teach. I know the routine.
Uh-huh.
But give me more than just a weekend off, like if I'm off for 5 days, that night before, I might start to go there. Oh, man, what shit show am I walking into tomorrow?
Right.
Oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to. Okay, that If I'm not aware of that, that's anxiety unmanaged, but shame's driving that. How do I manage it? Mindfulness. Pay attention. And this happens to me all the time. I will catch myself and I will flip it back around. I'm going to go in and take care of business the same way I've done for 10 years. It doesn't matter what's going on. And I bring myself back to where I can manage me right here, right now.
Okay.
And then the anxiety is managed and moved through, and the sense there, then shame goes away. Like, shame does not have to be attached to it. It can creep in, and that's the piece we can catch and be proactive about it and not have to react to the mismanagement of the emotion itself, especially when it comes to connection and behavior.
Okay, well, here's a good question for it. So now I get you. My ADD self is like, okay, well, no, that makes sense, but now we're back into this again. When you're teaching this and talking to a group of people, what kind of coping skills do you recommend so somebody either A, does not go in the vicious cycle, which I so wonderfully just displayed, or B, just to be able to be aware?
So, it doesn't take much. It really doesn't. Somebody will ask me, well, how do you do this work through shame? You are right now, just by opening the question to it. You are right now, just by opening the capacity to observe and bring in mindfulness.
A willingness to understand.
And to speak one's truth.
Yeah.
So, I'll give you an example. I was teaching a group. No, I forget what I was teaching. I think it had to do with trauma, but you better believe shame came up.
Right.
And this older gentleman who I'd never talked to one-on-one, but I'm pretty well connected with everybody. But he, and never spoken a word to him, but he came up after the class and was like, Mr. Ed, I think I got that shame thing. Can we talk? And I said, well, I only have a minute or two. So we went back to my office. And he sat down and he said, yeah, I think I got that shame. When I was a boy, I was sexually abused. And then he said, I've never spoken that to another human being. Well,
That's a long time to hold that in.
All I said to him was, thank you for feeling safe to share that with me.
Yeah.
And how brave that was. That was it. I had to get on to group. He moved on. The next morning, I'm walking down the hall first thing, and he comes running up to me crying, giving me this hug. And I'm thinking, shit, what'd I do to this guy?
Yeah.
But he goes, no, miss, you don't understand. For years, as far back as I can remember, I suffered from night terrors every night. And last night was the first night I slept through the night without a terror.
Wow. Talk about self-medication based.
My point is,
shame.
it doesn't take much in the ownership of shame and the exposure of it in a safe setting, which, by the way, that really is what the fellowships of recovery are all about, not just clinical counseling. That sense of, because really what we're doing is taking on the proper use of powerlessness. Powerlessness is not without power.
Right.
Powerlessness is the shift from everything I have no control over, which is past life experiences and everything and everybody in life, and tapping into what I do have, the power of me. The power to manage how I feel, how I think, and how I show up.
Yeah.
And there's great empowerment in that. And that's really what we're doing with shame. We're taking that power and we're putting it to use to move into our sense of self, our sense of we're enough, that's been there all along. We've just been buried under it, under these manifestations of suffering.
Yeah.
And again, it's all emotion. So, and it's only then that I have a true confidence in the power of me, authentic power now. I'm not talking about the drive of craving and all the other stuff. That's when I'm going to really show up and rely on the power greater than me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I truly believe, no matter what the concept is, for us in the human condition, the power greater than ourselves we experience through connection.
Yeah,
it's our
absolutely.
overall platform of connection, all of it.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not going to show up for that if I am not confident in me. I have been a trained public speaker and educator since 1994. But it wasn't till about 10 years ago that I was going to get up and speak in front of anybody. I mean, that's where shame really prevents us from moving into our true purpose, our passion. Because that requires vulnerability.
I hear you. I'm trying to really think back and think of the times to where shame could have actually been fear holding me from doing something that I knew I needed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, getting sober was something that I just knew I needed to do. And let's just say a lot of other people knew I needed to do it too.
Yes.
But I also, like, I've never had a problem with public speaking. Like, I think I was still doing comedy when I was in treatment. I didn't quit that until last year. And then I was like, oh, God, this is just too much. I'm done. I'm not thinking about myself as much. And just self-care, really, not ego. But I can't think of a time to where fear, not without going down another vicious cycle, but I can't think of a time where fear was actually shame of I'm trying to think of the last time I was actually afraid of getting into meetings, finding a community. I'll be honest with you, Ed, I'm almost 8 years and I still haven't done that. I've never done the steps. I had a sponsor in one fellowship for 2 weeks. Within my first 6 months, I finally got a first sponsor, and it was 2 weeks, and I just never thought about it again. And it's not a good thing. I had a lot of work.
What do you think's driving that, though?
I was totally in my way. I've always said that I'm the one that can do this. Yes. It's always been Billy Rame is the reason Billy Rame's going to succeed. Now I know that's complete bullshit. I couldn't be where I am right now without the other people living in this house, my parents, the people I have met through recovery. But
again, you're putting a judgment on that I haven't done this, it's not good. I'm just saying be careful of that.
Right. I'm not saying that I haven't done it, it's not good. I'm still feel okay.
Yes.
I'm saying that the fear of not being accepted.
Yes.
Oh, fuck, Ed. That's still shame.
So let me put it in these words for you. Shame is really the fear about who I am, where I come from. The fear about what was done to me, not done to me, what I did or didn't do.
Yeah.
Something about me is not enough. So yes, shame, this all goes together. But again, if I have a fear about my sense of self, how am I going to manage fear about external things? I'm not.
Yeah.
It's going to get in the way. But when I can see, wait, I'm not showing up for this because I'm afraid of being accepted. I don't want to be uncomfortable in this. Okay, I can take ownership for that part and either decide to move through it or not. It's just like I told you, I think on the phone before we talked, that I really do, one of the feedback, the most common feedback I get from our patients is, where can we see you? Where can we get a workshop? Yeah. So we talked briefly. I got to tell you, like I said, I can go into the arena of the treatment center fully confident. I have not control, but it's a comfortable environment. It is a closed environment. It is something that I have this influence in. Okay, putting myself out there, like, well, I'm doing right now, that feels a whole lot different. And I think a lot of the reason I've thought about this for a long time, the whole reason I haven't really pulled the trigger to do it, that's shame driven. That's based on my sense of self.
Like more shame of still haven't started it and prolonging or procrastinating, or shame of beating yourself up because
no. Shame does not have to be, you should be ashamed of yourself, like a negative thing.
Right.
It's just, again, hesitant about me. I'm going to be hesitant about how I show up in life.
Yeah.
And
I would listen to your shit every week, dude.
It can be subtle, though. Shame does not have to be this huge thing that I'm a complete loser, I'm just a piece of shit.
Yeah.
It's the subtlety of a compromised sense of self. That's all. An unrealistic sense of self.
Right.
Because you could say to me, as I've heard, I could hear you every day. What I'm telling myself is, yeah, but how am I going to look? And what is this? And really, what about the negative feedback I'm going to get?
I understand.
All the things that, and again, those are the stories that will lead us back into the mess. But in the very least, compromise our potential.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really it. I think the work of recovery is really, initially, recovery isn't about finding ourselves. We're not like a lost $10 bill in a pants pocket.
Right. Well,
it's really about returning to ourselves.
Yeah, understanding,
it's
rebuilding.
It's an excavation, a returning to our authentic self, really, that was always there, but got buried when the world got its hands on us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that takes a lot of work to not just do the excavation, but then be willing to do something with what we find. And that's the thing about shame. You got to get in it.
Yeah.
And then you got to be willing to own it. And then what am I going to do with it now? Okay, that sounds very easy. But because a lot of us, truly define ourselves by it, it's how we've operated for so long.
Yeah.
Our brains aren't just, my brain isn't just conditioned to drink and use. It's conditioned for shame. Because I reinforced that in me over and over through the years. Even before the drink or drug was really a disease. I mean, I can look back at that. So, well beyond the drink or drug, shame's where it's at.
Right. Yo. And I'm not like, when I come back and they're like, oh, I'm not playing the devil's advocate. It's not me battling what you're saying. I am just making sure that I've had a lot of
one of the most difficult parts of sharing this insight is making a connection with an individual about it. Because again, though shame is universal, I cannot tell you your sense of shame.
Yeah, no, it's all different. I
can't identify it for you.
Different levels, different avenues. Different
I can
ways
see it when somebody exposes it.
Yeah.
Through the mismanagement of other emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I understand that? Because I've been there. That's the thing. Shame can actually promote empathy. That's a beautiful redemptive part of all this.
Oh yeah.
And that's again really what every fellowship of recovery is about. Is that we have a shared sense of suffering and a shared sense of relief, no matter what the approach is. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if it's 12 steps, smart recovery, celebrate recovery, faith-based. It doesn't matter how we do it either. I mean, at the end of the day, I think for everyone, it's about where's my reliance today? Is my reliance on something external, not just a drink or drug, but anything external to feel fulfilled because I'm not inside? Or is my reliance on showing up for connection and my purpose because that fills me?
Yeah.
Because until we have that fulfillment of being in life through connection and purpose, we're still going to look out for a fix in some way. And ultimately, what I know for me is, since my brain's wired for it, if I keep doing that, I will be drunk and high again.
Right. Yeah, man. This is the quietest I've ever been during an episode. I'm just letting you know. I just love sitting back, listening and thinking and analyzing. As you're saying this, I'm like, oh, Billy, that's what you couldn't. Yeah, man.
And so the other piece to this that I think we need to pay attention to get past that, because anytime we feel different, and feel like that's us, our real sense of self, that's of course shame driven, but we certainly have moved through in our society the stigmas, and they're still out there with addiction. But really everything that I've said is really just a truth about the human condition for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just we are people of extremes. We get extreme in our humanness, and we mismanage it. So yeah, it makes sense early on. It takes extreme work. to move through it. But really, everybody does the work through shame.
Would you say that addiction basically then would really kind of root itself at the not being able to manage shame?
Yes.
Like just the root of addiction as a whole.
So in all the literature of the 12-step world,
right,
there's one piece I would rewrite, and it's step 1. We admitted we were powerless over drugs and alcohol. Everybody focuses on that. And that our lives have become unmanageable. Well, in that step, that first piece, that's easily resolved. Mm-hmm. Stop drinking and using. You have power over the drugs and alcohol. You have the power of choice. That my life was unmanageable, that's the piece. That's it right there.
Yeah.
And why was life unmanageable? It wasn't about life. It was about what was going on in me.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't manage life because I could not manage and accept me. And really feel that I'm enough.
Yeah.
That's shame. We got to have that basis. We don't recognize it. And I think it's going to be helpful if we do more. That as we're doing the work, if we do an inventory and you speak resentment, you speak your part in it, that's the work through shame.
Yeah.
Even if the word doesn't come up. If we look at fear and, we're challenged there to ask the question, how did I get the ball rolling in the fear? Again, where did I get so extreme in my humanness? That's a character defect. And again, we got to be careful about language. I still use the term character defect because I teach by the big book.
Right.
But that is shame promoting language. We are not defective.
Definitely is.
So really, they're just extremes of humanness.
That was one thing about treatment that I was a sponge. Like, I didn't really get into... Of course, I loved being a clown and making everybody laugh. That was my favorite part of my day. But I remember, I think it was Carmen who said to me that pulled me aside and said, hey, that was really funny, with a serious face. And I knew, I was like, oh, what did I do wrong? And she was like, when are you going to work on yourself? That's what you're here for, right? Like, what are you hiding? Why are you using humor to... And it really made me kind of think about it. Now, did I still tell the jokes? Absolutely. It's who I was.
Sure.
But I always made sure I sectioned my day to where the times that I knew I needed, like before small group, I made sure I had a clear head before going in. Talking with... And I wish I could remember my small group counselor's name. I've been trying to think about it for 5 years. Nicest guy. I don't even know if he's there anymore. Like he said some really profound stuff to other people in small group that really kind of put me in line of, okay, now I understand why I was doing the things I was doing to myself. I didn't hate myself. I've never hated myself, but I've always was hard on myself that I couldn't be more. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't more. Like, it's always been like let's call it what it is, entitlement. Mm-hmm. I felt entitled that I should be more than what I was.
Well, I don't need to tell you what drives that.
Right. It's fucking shame, man.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I do. But I soaked everything up as a sponge. I did make some friends, but I didn't, well, honestly, I have 3 friends. That are still in the program, still help with like the alumni and stuff. Mm-hmm. Which, God, this town, I have 2 things I got to give to WTC. One is I personally felt welcomed and felt heard and felt comfortable to kind of get out of the clown shell and really kind of learn about myself. That says a lot, just right there. Mm-hmm. Now, I know everybody has different experiences. Mine was great. I could have stayed another 10 days. I had the insurance, but I was like, you know what? The curriculum's starting over. I think it's time for me to go. And I think I left 3 days early. The other thing was the aftercare program and the alumni program.
100%.
Oh my God. I don't know what I would have done without the alumni to be able to answer questions. I mean, for one, Kelly is just amazing.
Yes.
Like I've never met somebody so willing to put people she's just met in front of themselves, and
she is empathy in action.
Oh man. Like I'm not just saying that, like she's been on here before and it was a great episode. Yeah, it's a great episode. But I mean, since then, like talking to other people that either she's recommended or other recommended, one thing I've said about this, and I'm going to love this episode, and editing this, I don't think there's going to be much editing. I'm just going to let that bitch play. But what I think a lot of people, and this is, we're going to go up to a last question here to kind of help what I'm about to ask. I think a lot of people are going to be able to understand a lot of emotions hearing you, and I do strongly urge you to do what you were going to do.
Thank you.
With this. I really do. You do have a way of words and putting and explaining emotion in a way that it's not, this is what it is. You're saying it in the way to where it floats in the head for a second and it rattles around until it sticks, and wherever it sticks is up to that person's personality and characteristics.
That's it.
That's great. You've done a great job at wording that.
Well, thank you.
I listened to every word you said, but also back here
that's just it.
Is just swirling of ideas and like, oh, okay, I'm going to implement that. But what would you say to someone for, say, a resource, but like, great, Ed. Great, Ed, I watched this that you were on. I've been listening to your deal that you've been doing, but I don't know where to go find and learn more about this besides listening to you over and over.
Well, there's a lot of great resources out there, for sure. And so transparency, a lot of what I teach with emotions comes from our leading researcher in emotions. She has been doing it for over 30 years, Dr. Brene Brown. She is a sociologist, psychologist. She is, but she has been researching the human condition through connection, through vulnerability, shame, putting accurate language to emotions themselves. She's also, I think, I don't know what year, but close to 30 years in recovery. She gets how all this.
She did a TED Talk, didn't she?
She's done
was it a master class,
and she has many books out.
Yeah,
That's the primary resource I would go to. But I think also, I think a lot of this just starts with the practice of mindfulness itself. Pay attention. And even if you don't know necessarily what to call the emotion, if you can observe it, you can put words to it, and that's going to lead to more effectively communicating it. But more than that, effectively managing it. Because we're wired to feel. It's not optional. And so because of that, our trapping is when I try to avoid emotion, when I try to push it down, run from it, it amps up even more and it becomes more unmanageable. So I think just knowing that I'm feeling right now, not sure what I'm feeling, but what am I going to do with this?
Yeah, and it's okay.
But the answer's connection. You said it. I describe the treatment center as a training ground for healthy connection. That's all we are. Absolutely. And all we really are as staff are teachers of healthy connection. Well, I could say the same true for fellowships of recovery, that, this is about, it's training how to manage ourselves in a relatively safe setting.
Yeah.
So that we can then apply that to the other connections in life, especially our strained and broken ones or unhealthy ones. Because that's one rub of vulnerability. If I'm looking at the risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure of connection, and I'm learning how to practice vulnerability with the essentials of setting limits, setting boundaries around, being selective about the feedback I let in, I learn to steer into the direction of healthy connection and build confidence in that. But I also have to be doing that for me in order to stay in it. So yeah, we do not understand emotions in our society, I think, as a species, really. We're starting to, but I'm just saying the build up to it. We didn't talk about shame until recently. Hell, I didn't even teach about it until a little over a year ago. And here's the beautiful part. It really didn't take me understanding it to really falling back in it again. Yeah. And that also promoted a heightened sense of empathy. Not just in what I do for work, a sense of empathy. Well, let me back up. Humility first. Mm-hmm. I had to get back to me and really get back to a more solid sense of me, and then begin to go back in the understanding of others. Yeah. It's made me a better educator, clinician. It's made me a better person.
Oh, I bet. I mean, that's a huge thing to be able to, when you can really connect with yourself and understand yourself. And it's never going to be fully understood.
The challenge remains. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to
Shame is creepy. It'll creep in, sometimes over the littlest things. And that's okay. When I can see it for what it is, I can be like, oh, no wonder I'm so angry at myself right now. All right, I got to stop that shit. Or I got to stop allowing anxiety to get in the way of what I know I need to be doing.
Right.
So,
I mean, really through everything, the whole power is self-acceptance and understanding being the raft to navigate through all of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And learning how not to negotiate myself for others. See, that's the thing. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. I experience this with my family a lot. My siblings who have more money, like your original example. And sometimes that really creeps in, where it just sends me into this, I'm not enough. I go into that comparison.
Yeah.
And that can be very derailing. Mm-hmm. But I got to take ownership for it. It's not about my siblings. It's not about anything out here.
Yeah.
Is what do I have going on in here?
Man, I got a lot to think about, Ed. I got a lot to think about.
Happy to be of use.
Like I'm very happy. I am right now the best version of myself I've ever been, but there is never not room to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one people where complacency really becomes the biggest devil.
And I think the make or break of that is, you mentioned, I should be doing more. Yeah. That's judgment. Mm-hmm. Really, it's about, all right, then what can I do to do more? Mm-hmm. What's going to motivate me to do more? What can I, and that's all across the boards.
Yeah.
How we elevate ourselves to a better self physically, emotionally, spiritually, our sense of purpose, all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have and still have spent most of my adult life overweight. Well, shit, it took me 53 years to figure out, what? I like the gym. Yeah. It's actually a cool place, and I actually feel good when I go there.
Yeah, I miss it.
But it took a lot. Well, and this holiday season, I kind of fell off it a bit, and shame creeps in. Oh, you should be going. But if I don't take control of that, that's just cop out to I'm not going to go, and that's why I stayed stuck in it for so long. Mm-hmm. Again, all right, what do I need to do to move through this? And allow myself that, all right, this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
See, that's the real piece of any spark of change has to be and start with, I'm okay with me right now. Yeah. I'm okay with me right now. Now I'm going to take that and get to where I want to be.
And another part of that, about like going to the gym or self-care in general, you have to be okay with you in order to implement any sort of discipline, which I think discipline is crucial. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was Nick last season said it, and it stuck with me all the time. Like, discipline really is the truest form of self-love.
Yes. And there's shame again. If I don't have a valued sense of self, I'm not going to invest the effort in myself.
Yeah.
Which is why we settle. We settle all around in life. We settle, ultimately, in this disease for the drink or drug connection. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly it. And now, once we're sober, we have the absolute ability for willpower and discipline. And we can use that. We can become sovereign of ourselves. But again, I'm not going to take sovereignty of myself if I don't value the kingdom of me? You know?
Boom, right there. Ed, we made my day.
Thanks, me
That's
too.
the perfect ending right there.